The more that I thought about the parable, I kept asking myself, who am I in the story?
Mm-hmm.
Am I the Levite? Am I the priest? Am I the Samaritan? I thought I was the Samaritan. For many of us, we look at the story, and if we're doing good deeds, or our life is where God wants it to be, then all right, put yourself in the rightful place of the good Samaritan. But the more I thought about that, the more further from reality I was. Because none of us is good. What is going on, Post Sunday podcasters? We are excited to be with you guys here at the Post Sunday podcast. Welcome, episode 46. It's getting a little chilly outside, and even in here, but but I'll tell you something, the conversations are going to be heating up today. We are excited. As you guys know, or maybe haven't been aware, our fearless leader is on a sabbatical, so he's going to be gone for some time. So everyone's been asking me, what are you going to do with the pod? How are you going to survive? What's going on? And so we're taking it 1 week at a time. But I got with me a regular to the podcast, one of our pastors here
regular
at Genesis
strong
Church,
word. Regular
Orlando.
strong.
But my man, Pastor PJ Charles, what is up, dude?
What's going on, sir? Happy to be back at the pod. You know. Always love to come in and sit and share and talk and cut up a little bit.
I think we get the most views and listens when you get in there. So,
Don't
humble brag.
I don't know about all of that, but I do enjoy the opportunity to be able to come hang out with you.
So good, man. Thank you. Pastor PJ asked me a couple weeks back. He was one of those like, hey, what you got? He deeply, I kind of sensed his enjoyment.
I care for you, Johnny. I don't want you being straight. It's not about me. It's about you, bro.
You, bro.
I just want to be here to help.
They're like, how you gonna carry this thing, bro? We don't think you could do this alone, bro. Like
well, that's no fun. You're like talking to yourself for an hour.
That's why, man. I had the opportunity to roll alone, but I was like, nah, man, I just, this pod really flows well with a couple voices.
Yeah.
In it. And so you being truly a lot of wisdom coming from your end, I'm really glad to have you on this episode.
Yeah.
I was able to spend some time with the church. I'm just super thankful for the opportunity to speak.
Right.
I don't take that for granted, as you guys know.
100%, that's right.
I think I overly prepare.
You definitely do that.
And so,
maybe we just underprepare.
I don't know.
I mean,
raising the bar, I get little jabs with my with my examples and props, but then it's okay for y'all to come in with some examples and props, and then not only examples and props, but y'all come in with fences and graffitied up.
I have never done that. I think the most I brought in was a shawl, a little prayer shawl. I bring no weight to the game.
No, and you did the example of all examples.
What's that?
You spoke on the story of Samson,
right?
And you shaved your head. Hold on. Was it the story of Samson?
No, it wasn't
the story of Samson.
No.
I felt like it tied in though.
Okay, so really funny story. When I did shave my head, and I was really stressing. I didn't want to necessarily shave my head and surprise the whole church, but I did. And I was speaking on Lazarus, right? Yeah. So true story. I don't know if I ever told you this. So there was a young lady, because I prefaced the message with, this is going to be, rough for some people. It's a difficult topic to talk about. And everybody's standing there watching me with a bald head. And one young lady, she goes, Pastor PJ, through like half the service, I was just crying because you're talking about dead coming to life and all of this stuff. And she's like, I'm just waiting to hear you say you got a diagnosis or something. And that's why you Girl thought I was sick. Like, no. I felt horrible.
Wow.
I felt horrible. So I was like, no, I'm not dying.
Yeah.
I was just, I'm just getting old, and my hair started to fall out, man.
It looks fantastic.
I had to chop it off.
Yeah,
but,
definitely gotten used to it. It's really
owning the ball top.
Yeah,
I love it.
You've done good. I look at pictures in the past now. I'm like,
I don't even see it, man. Yeah. Very far removed.
So good, man. But I'm excited to have you on. I truly
man.
am. This is great. I want to get a different perspective. I was able to, like I was saying, speak on the Good Samaritan this past weekend.
Good passage.
Man, a classic. Classic. So, in my head, I'm always, me, man. Things are churning a little bit.
Yes.
Always creatively trying to bring a different perspective. Especially coming out of last week's message where Pastor Chad brought some really, really good perspective on just kind of like history, background, bringing a little more context to the storyline, what it could have been, where it could have taken place. So that was really, really cool, man. And so I wanted to match that type of energy. Especially with a story that we've become very fond of, even in you could argue nowadays. I mean, it's such a part of our language, right? Anybody does anything nice, it's like, oh, you're being a good Samaritan.
You're being a good Samaritan.
It's
and I have no idea.
Idea. So integrated into our society with how impactful that parable is. I read a really cool quote by Eugene Peterson. I didn't mention it in the teaching, but it said this: parables have a way of leaving you feeling like you understand them until the day you realize you don't.
Wow.
And when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, because it's so true to the fact that, one thing parables is like a seed, man. And it's deposited and it grows and changes over time.
Right.
And it just
to the
begins,
reader.
To reveal new truths to you in every season of your life. And that's kind of how it's been these last few weeks, diving into the parables of Jesus, these stories. And let's be honest, people truly understand there's something unique about a story. People may forget a lot of what you say, but they rarely will forget a story.
Right.
A good story.
And that's what makes the parables have so much power, right? Even biblically in that time, right? Real people, real place, real time, Tim's fond of saying.
Yeah.
At that time, and I think that's where the disconnect is between then and now, because a lot of the parables were uniquely crafted to address exactly who Jesus was talking to. Like, he knew his audience. So it's kind of what we do, right?
Yes.
We don't sit and prepare a message just going, okay, here's the points, here's the things. There's some validity to that, and it requires a touch of that. But I think at our church, among our team, I was laughing with Angie, and I said, we all have our pockets, right? Like, as pastors, we all have our own collective, if you will, our own target, our own space. But what that allows us each to do is to be real with who we're serving. And so when we do sit down to write our messages, almost like when I did write Lazarus, I knew very well, because of my connectivity to certain members in our church, I knew that there were, through all three services, at least a half a dozen people that were dealing with loss. Wow. And so my sensitivity to that awareness is what applies as I'm starting to think about this and how I'm crafting it, because I want to be sensitive, but I also want to be encouraging, but I also don't want to have someone running out of the service in tears because there's something that I said that was maybe a little callous or, and so I believe we write for our flock, and so good. There's some weight in that. Yeah. And so as we craft our message, it's almost exactly the same as Jesus speaking in these parables, right? Our difference is we have to move it from that time frame to this time frame, right? And so it's applicable.
Yeah, big time, man. And that's what we try to really do is, the understanding is for us that we want to bring something relatable, understandable,
right?
But something that is transferring into the person that brings transformation too. So a lot to think through as we're crafting it.
Right.
But that's why the Lord has called us to do this work, and He puts everybody in their specific assignments.
Right.
Just a quick side note, and I say this just with so much excitement, but I got to preach yesterday, but I got some really good news about my father.
Right. Which was awesome.
And if you guys don't know or didn't check out, anyways, I would encourage you guys, check out genesischurchorlando.com/media. You'll be able to hear all of our previous sermons, and really ties in well with where we go in the podcast. So kind of a 1-2 punch for you. But I mentioned just my dad. We spoke, I believe it was Thursday. And there was a little bit of hesitancy. He said, I'll tell you something on Monday. And I was just like, oh, what is it? In my head, I thought something was up. I always have the thought that he's going to give me the news that he's going to come down here and live.
Okay.
So
is that what you're waiting to hear?
That was kind of what I was anticipating. And I think he noticed that excitement or whatnot. And so he just spilled the beans. And I already had told him I was speaking Sunday. And he's like, I'll just tell you now, I'm going to be bringing word on Sunday. I was asked to do that after 34 years, just away from the pulpit, just things that he had to deal with in his life. God was doing things with him, and everybody has a season and everybody has a duration. But we've been praying diligently for his soul and for God to continue to work. And God has, the last 3-4 years has been tremendous transformation, more than I even know. It's funny, You pray for somebody and you just kind of, you think like, all right, it is what it is, kind of let's move on. And don't realize that God doesn't forget. He's doing the transformative work, and you're sitting there and you're like, oh man, I prayed for that.
It's so funny you said that. I'm reading, Tim always talks about The Circle Maker by Mark Batterson. And so I'm reading it now.
Nice.
And
I like his lion book. He's got something lion.
Yeah, his first book was The Lion in the Snow.
Yeah,
in the den with the lion in the snow on a snowy day. You could have shortened that. But he's speaking about that. He goes, our prayers are eternal. Right? Like, just because we might go through our season of life and come and go doesn't mean that those prayers won't be answered. So a lot of times, if we're praying in advance, and he's talking about Daniel, who was praying for Jerusalem getting rebuilt, he knew he wouldn't see that in his lifetime. Wow. But it didn't stop him from praying for that.
Wow.
And so his prayers transcended his life.
Wow.
Right? And so sometimes we have to pray for the long game. All right? And not be afraid or grow weary of that.
Wow.
Because sometimes our prayers will be answered. We may not see that. We may not see the fruition of that intensity of our prayer and that focus of our prayer. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that God's going to let it go after we're gone.
Crazy. Mm-hmm. And so all my prayer has always been, God, let me hear him again.
Wow.
And I want to hear him again. I was 5 years old.
Wow.
I didn't pay too much attention, and no 5-year-old sitting there listening to a sermon.
Right?
not
attentively.
I'm under the benches, bro.
You got 5 minutes.
Pinching me to behave. Calm yourself down, boy. Seriously. The best that they could do to tame me was give me some bongos, kind of like bongose they call it. It's like the smaller congas.
With the two, yeah.
Yeah. And they're like, just sit there and play while they do worship.
Wow.
And so I'm just
you just bringing in the percussion.
Not knowing that God was developing me and getting me ready for worship.
Wow.
For my entire life. So
that's intense.
Yeah, but I prayed, man, God, I want to hear him one day. And I said, Dad, you have to record. You got to record this, because they don't do that.
Right.
And they did, man.
Okay.
Facebook Live on it. She sent it to me through Messenger. I was able to watch it.
What did he speak on?
The grace of God.
Okay.
The grace of God.
All right.
Which is so fitting for his life.
Mm-hmm.
So I was super thankful. He kind of broke down how his sermon was going to be. And it's just really, man, like I get emotional later on.
Okay.
Because in the moment, I'm soaking in with him.
Right.
And later on, it just hits me. It hits me like, gosh, I can't believe I'm full circle. Like, it's
legacy
all
of faith.
Like,
it's a legacy.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. So Yeah. So sorry to deviate there, but it's just been so cool, man.
That was a good moment for you, man. It's
to
fantastic.
lean on that. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. But anyways, the Good Samaritan,
Mm-hmm.
classic parable, man.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that? Like when you think Good Samaritan, the parable, all of that, like what immediately hits you or has hit you in the past that?
So it's funny you asked that. So there's a man, he's a scholar, he's a gentleman. This man oozes discipleship. His whole life has been dedicated to it. You may know who I'm talking about, Joffrey Harris.
Yes,
right?
Joffrey, great guy.
And so way back in the day, shout out Joffrey.
Yes.
Way back in the day, he gave me a book called God Space. And it spoke predominantly about what your message was about in a different way. It spoke about how we have to create space for God to move. Wow. And God wants to use us. However, way too often we keep our agendas and our schedule so tight, we don't make enough room for God's space. All right. Wow. And so that's exactly what, in a nutshell, your message was about. And so when you started on Sunday and I'm sitting there listening, I was like, God space. That's exactly what this is about.
Wow.
And I remember when I'm reading the book, but I'm so agenda driven, I'll never forget. I was going from one place to another, and there was a hiccup in my schedule, and I was so frustrated. And so I'm stuck now, and now I'm sitting in traffic, and my cousin from New York calls me, and we're talking, and I'm voicing my frustration with him. And he goes, but if this didn't happen, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. We wouldn't, and we were having a great conversation. Even in my frustration, we're going back and forth. We're talking about things, scripture and things like that. And he said, sometimes your agenda's so tight. If you were on schedule, this conversation wouldn't have happened. Wow. And if this conversation wouldn't have happened, we wouldn't have been able to fill each other up the way we just did. And I had to sit back and go, I've got this book at home earmarked that I'm reading, and I'm soaking in the information. This is the second part of what you said. Wow. It's in my head, but it's not in my heart. And not realizing I have to create margin for God to move.
Wow.
And what's funny is if you look at me now, it's kind of all I do on a Sunday, isn't it? Right? Like I don't have much of an agenda on Sunday except to be out there, see people, which is what you spoke about, respond to what I see, and then be able to, participate in whatever it is that they're going in and be able to lend whatever it is that I can lend to whatever situations are going on, even if it's just a hello or a hug,
It's funny that you're here with me on a topic of Good Samaritan because, as you're speaking, I'm like, you ooze that all over you. Like you saw a need I forget where you went that really sparked your whole
Bolivia. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Your whole just mission in life. But you saw, right? Like
I did. Yeah.
It all began with you seeing a need that sparked an action, a desire to do something about it. And you've been doing it for over
15 years.
Straight Street. It's an organization that feeds the hungry and homeless in Orlando. And you're doing it despite a pandemic.
Right.
Resources
all through that.
Low at times.
Yeah.
I remember having conversations
very daunting.
with our pastors about not knowing if this thing can go through.
Yep. Didn't think we were going to sustain. Yeah.
You're feeding people daily now with a team of people that believe in the mission that God's placed in your heart. That is your modern day Samaritan, bro.
And then again, to talk about, weave it into your message, the reason I named, the organization Straight Street, well, God gave me the name, is what I prayed for, that he would give me the name. But Straight Street is all about Paul and his meeting with Ananias, right? And Ananias had to restore his vision so that he could see again, right? And so that's the whole premise of Straight Street, is to restore vision. It's for those who serve as well as for those that were serving to just have the scales come off their eyes and just be real,
Yeah.
you know? And so when we call people out to volunteer and to serve, it's for that Good Samaritan experience.
Yes.
Is to understand that you are capable of taking time out of your schedule to help someone, you know, as much as it is for those that we're helping, to realize that there are good people around and that you shouldn't give up hope and all of those types of things. So it's all about sight as well.
Good. And that's really when I go out there, when I bring my kids out there, the purpose is for them to see.
Yeah.
See that there is need, see that God has been good to you.
Yeah.
See so many different things, lessons to be learned that all just hopefully draw you near to God's purposes in your life.
And we have to give a shout out to people from our church, because I will tell you, last Tuesday, you brought your family out. Your kids love coming out and serving.
Men's group though, bro.
But the men's group, they came with fire.
They did.
And they brought their families out. And then there were a couple of people that weren't in the men's group that showed up as well. I got a email from a woman named Yvette. She's a member from our church, and I will tell you, her email Wednesday morning after the night at Straight Street. What's up, Yvette? I hope you're listening. Almost brought me to like tears, because like you said, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I do get a little numb, and even the serving comes off. It's just off the cuff, right? It's like what I do, so I don't put a lot of oomph behind it. I don't really do a lot of backward thinking or forward thinking. It's just kind of automatic, right?
Yeah.
But to her fresh eyes on the whole night, it was so impacting. And she's just like, you have re-inspired me to find purpose in serving others. And it was just so cool. It was just a beautiful email. And it's fantastic, because it does get, I don't want to say ritualistic, but kind of just, there's an automaticity to what you do sometimes when you serve. Yeah. And so it is important to kind of just really kind of sit back sometimes and just really soak in the gravity of what we're called to. It's funny because I have been doing this for so long, but we are dealing with a very downtrodden demographic where people are hurting, people are hostile, and we step in the gap for them on a daily basis. Yeah. And it's work, of course, but it's a blessing to be that.
Yes.
And sometimes we just need to remember that a lot of times serving others, we reap a bigger blessing from it than we give, you know?
So true. And that's really, shout out first, again, like you said, our people have come through tremendously. Yeah. I mean, that men's group has been doing some
so
very
much food,
impactful things.
There's so much food.
So much food. We finished Sunday service, and we're just getting tons and tons of bags for our thanks for giving.
Yes. Like
the response is amazing. And that's kind of the conflict I had a little bit with this message, because for me, I felt like our people are doing the work.
Yes.
You know, just like I think Chad spoke a few weeks ago, and he's like, I forget what the topic was.
Speaking of generosity, he was like, it's hard to do this
because they're doing it. They're doing it, and so I'm not going to go through that angle. I'm gonna celebrate that.
Right.
And so there was moments where I felt like, and maybe in the pod here, I was like, man, let me spend some time celebrating that a little bit more, because, man, it's so true. Our people have just been lights out, man, when it comes to generosity, giving.
But if we were all very, very honest with ourselves, because I do this all the time.
Yeah.
I will walk away from a certain conversation. I will walk away from a certain meeting or a transactional kind of experience with someone, and I'll get in a car, or I'll walk away. I'm like, oh, I should have prayed with that person, or I could have stayed around a little longer and encouraged them. So yeah, we're there, but it's like anything else. We can always be better, right? Yes. So we don't have to chastise our congregation, but we do need to encourage and just show them that, yeah, we do, but we can always do more. You know, so it's like, okay, so yeah, I do Straight Street and I do this and I do that and I do that. But then, you know, on smaller scales, what do we miss? What opportunities do we miss out on? And I think that's the thing with this parable that's hugely important. And there's facets to it, of course, right? But the main thing is like the priest and the Levite is kind of like you said, like they clocked out, right? They did their job.
Yeah.
They punched out for the day. And now they're on their way home. But ministry isn't a 9 to 5, right? Discipleship isn't a 9 to 5. It's living, it's breathing, it's active, just like God's word. And it's all the time. It's with your kids. It's with your wife. It's with the person at Publix at the grocery store. It's that chance encounter that you might have with someone when you're pumping gas, right? Like there's always those opportunities, and we are human. And yes, we do get distracted. And yes, we do get busy. So we're not beating anybody up for it. But in the same instance, it's kind of like, are our eyes as wide open as they could be?
Yeah.
You know, like.
Yeah. And we talked about the eyes of the head and the eyes of the heart.
The eyes of the head and the eyes of the heart.
Which Chad we worked on that together, really brought that great insight to me, because it's so true, man.
Right.
I would say this. Be attentive to the disruptions that come about in your life. Because I will say, like, even for someone that's in the weeds and seeds of serving, and
right,
you know, for this priest and Levite, their life revolved around a commitment and devotion to the temple, right? So there is a full lifestyle, which, hey, kudos to them, fantastic for having that consistency, that lifestyle, and choosing that, right? But there's something about the disruptions that come that on the other side of it propel something new in you, or launch you into a new perspective, a new lane in ministry. It awakens something in you. And it doesn't happen until you respond to the disruption.
Right.
And so here is this man that has been beaten. It's an obvious disruption for these people to do something about it.
Right.
For some of us, it might come obvious. It might not. But that's why we have to always look through the lens of our heart.
Right.
Because I want to be able to see through your perspective, God, that individual out there, that middle class person that has the suit, looks nice. In my eyes, I don't think they have a need.
Right.
But in your eyes, God, what is it that you see?
Right.
Can I see through that lens? Because they need something. We all need a creator. And that is the reality of it, man. And so true. It's the check in, check out, clock in, clock out mentality.
Right.
You know, attendance, roll call it what you want.
But equally as important is when you set the scene, right, in place as you're beginning your message, there's valid reasons why they didn't stop.
Yeah.
There was safety at stake. There was time at stake, time of the day, right?
And laws.
You know, laws,
and religious laws that they
religious laws. There's a lot of different justifiable reasons for not stopping in the head.
So true.
Right? But then in the heart, you kind of have to ask yourself, and I think I spoke this to our high school students a few weeks back. You know, there's a popular worship song a few years old, God, break my heart for what breaks yours, right?
Yes,
and I think that's the lens we need to look at our world at, right? Like, what breaks God's heart that would drive me to prayer, or drive me to contrition, or drive me to action, all right? And that's the difference between the eyes of the head and the eyes of the heart, right? Are we using God's heart, you know, as a lens to look at things, and then realizing that we're in that space for a reason.
Big time.
Right?
Big time. And so I would say that you could probably double the amount of excuses in an instant.
Any day, every day.
Automatically.
Yep.
It does not take effort because we lean on comfort. We lean on the path of least resistance. We lean on just safety.
Yeah. I could tell you a story of yesterday if you want to hear it. You want to hear it?
Yeah.
And this is good. This might be really bad. No, it will be really bad. But let's talk about excuses. So, we moved downtown for our kids because they go to Orlando Science, and so unfortunately and fortunately, we have to ride the trail, right? Orange Blossom Trail, for all of you out of town listeners. Orange Blossom Trail is Sodom and Gomorrah, unfortunately.
It's the road of blood.
It's the
17 miles stretch from Jerusalem to Jericho.
It is so bad. You don't want to stop for any. Angela won't even stop for gas. Like, she'll be like, let me make it to Orange Avenue.
I don't blame her, bro. I don't blame her.
So we're driving. I actually have both kids in the car. No, I have Jackson in the car, and I'm driving home, right, from an appointment. And I see a woman, clearly a prostitute. There's no way around it, right? She's sitting, she's disheveled, her clothes look a little like torn, and she's sitting at the curb of a hotel, which is clear what the hotel is for, what it's about, whatever, right? But she's crying, right? And I'm driving past and I see it out of the corner of my eye. And now I turn like full circle and I see this woman just sobbing. I don't know what happened. And the strongest urge in me was pull over real quick. You're not too late. Pull into the parking lot of the hotel. Go out. See what this woman needs. Right? And man, my head took over. I have Jackson here. I got to get him home. He's got to eat. I got to get stuff done at the house. I got to circle back, pick up the other kid. And I just start, but most importantly, I was kind of like, this isn't a safe space for Jackson. If I was by myself, I would have stopped. But I couldn't get the whole thing out of my head. And even still, I'm kind of like, Jackson knows who I am. Jackson knows what I do. He's 14 years young. But man, that kid understands ministry life. He understands his dad's life.
Yes, he does.
He would have been all about it, you know? But it's something in me. I didn't stop, you know? And even as I'm telling the story, I'm just filled with just remorse that in some way, even if I was just to sit and console her and pray with her, I could have done something to help change her, whatever position she found herself in, you know?
Yeah.
But I didn't. And so it was exactly that thing, right? So like we put it in place. We've got the stretch of road. We've got crime. We've got all of those things. Oh, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe that happened to me yesterday to come do this today, you know?
But it's a lesson, bro.
But it's a full-blown lesson, right? And there's those coulda, shoulda, wouldas, right? Like I can validate and justify all of the reasons I didn't stop. And I'm sure everybody listening is going to be like, well, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. That makes sense. But what never makes sense is what God calls us to.
Wow.
And if we try to make sense of it, we'll never act in the way that we should. And so even to say as a Levite or as a priest who has all of these obligations and has all of these purposes and I'm defined by my title, right? There was still a moment there where I could have just been a Christ follower. And I didn't, unfortunately, take advantage of that situation. And even this morning, driving the kids to work, I was like, man, I wonder if I'm going to see this woman out there, you know? Because her picture is embedded in my brain right now.
I've dealt with that. I definitely have dealt with those moments.
Yeah, that's kind of sucky. Let's clock out. I got to go.
No,
I got to go pray.
Stop.
No, I'm just playing.
So relatable. It's so relatable.
But it's relatable, right?
So relatable. That's all of us, bro. That is all of our story. We're the king and queens of excuses. We know how to turn that on instantaneously. Yeah, which is scary.
Right.
It's scary that's our first trigger. That's our first button. It's like, God, help me to not let that be that anymore.
Right.
Like, it's like, and that's daily, Lord, show me, and so what we're talking about here today, you and I, is found in Luke chapter 10.
Right.
And verses 25 through 37. And I wanted to hone in a little bit, and I hope I'm not catching you off guard a little bit, but this kind of correlates a bit with the differences between the written law and the spirit of the law. Because I think for many of us, and I didn't really, for reading this story growing up, it's just ethically, right? Morally, like, just do the right thing, man.
Right.
Without knowing, like, they had not only the don't be inconvenienced factor and safety factor, but there was a legitimate, like,
there's a law
factor behind this that could put them into play with losing all that they've worked for.
Right. Laws of cleanliness. Right. The whole blood thing was very, very important.
Yeah,
to think about there as well, right?
So
like,
I'm gonna pop a graphic here for you guys, and this is the key differences here of the written law and the spirit of the law. And so the interpretation, it's literal, it's fixed. The objective is to follow explicit commandments.
Right.
You are all in. I'm not deviating one bit. Exact compliance with the text, and then the risk can become rigid and legalistic. So that defines Pharisees and Sadducees and religious leaders.
Defines religion, period.
Right?
Yeah.
Though anyone.
Uh-huh.
But the spirit of the law interpretation is flexible and values based.
Right.
It's to fulfill the purpose behind them, right? The objective. To continue contextual. It's contextual and situational. But the risk can become too subjective. So I tend to think that Jesus was really walking in between the two.
Right.
You yes, it's great. Follow the laws. Like, even in his answer to the lawyer in the first question, you've answered correctly.
Right.
That's
very good.
Yeah, very good. Now go do them.
Right.
So now live the spirit of the law. Right. It seems to me like he's kind of pointing him to that.
Right.
Don't be so rigid. Like, open yourself up to explore the mercies of God, of the richness of God, because there is a balance between the two. I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Well, the lawyer's question of who is my neighbor is an exact attack in defense of the law, but also to kind of throw a dagger at Jesus for even, like, implying that the law plus was allowed. Right? It's like, no, I am staying within the parameters of the law. So it's almost the same as the rich young ruler when he's like, bro, I do all of this stuff.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And it's like, yeah, but there's no heart behind anything that you do. Right? So for even the lawyer to ask, well, who's my neighbor?
Wow.
Is like, oh, so now you want more conditions on top of conditions.
Wow.
Right? So you clearly are great at following.
Yes.
But not so much at leading.
Wow.
All right?
So
true. You need me to tell you who your neighbor is. Now I have to go in on you, right? And so now that's what Jesus does, right? So he's kind of like, okay,
yeah,
here you go.
Yeah.
Right?
But the great thing about Jesus, we mentioned it on Sunday, is that like, we're coming at this lawyer pretty hard, but Jesus didn't even approach it the way that we did, right?
Right.
He's like, okay, I'll allow you to have your narrow thinking, but I'm going to
here's the story.
Use this story for you to broaden a little bit of that.
Right.
And so the story goes on for those that maybe have, I'm sure everyone's read it, but just to paraphrase it a bit, This man is going down from Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
And let me see, I think I got the scriptures here. We can pop in some scripture here. Maybe not. Let me see real quick. No, it's okay.
Yeah,
so
we
this
got it.
man, I got it. So
Open your Bibles, people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sorry, we won't have it on screen, but just Luke 10, and I'm going on 30 right now. He was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, so we talked about that, right? I never saw that, right? That meant it to put some perspective to that the priest and Levite that we're going to be reading about here were finishing their duties.
Mm-hmm.
Jerusalem was the place where the temple was located.
Right.
Many religious leaders would do their duties for the day there, and then many of them would reside in areas surrounding it. Jericho was one of them, and so that means he's coming down. So that means duties were finished.
Right.
You did your 9 to 5.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so as we keep reading, think through that, keep that in mind. They stripped. So this man was beaten. There's a man half dead in the road. A priest happened to be going down the same road.
Right.
When he saw the man, he passed him by. Same song and dance for the Levite. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where the man was. And when he saw him, he took pity on him. And so, to have that perspective really... It changed the story just entirely for me.
So let me add.
Go, yes.
Let me add a couple of other things to it, right? The first thing is Jesus says, "Amen." You don't know whether the man is Jew, Gentile,
It's so true.
sojourner,
So true.
citizen, Roman. He doesn't say. He doesn't say who the man is.
True.
All right. He just says, "Amen." Right. Which is important. And I'll tell you why. Right. Because if we move through the scope of the story, he then goes and speaks about a priest, right? Someone who is supposed to be what? Caring for the people. Right. Same with the Levite. Right. But now you have a Samaritan who Jews despise. All right. So now the story is, it's okay if it was a Gentile because the Samaritan is just being helpful. It's emphasized even more if the man was a Jew, because then that would mean now the Samaritan has to go against his own prejudice, right, in order to serve a Jew. But then it says it's just a man.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you look at that in the scope of it, Jesus is really... Okay, you ready for it?
Go.
Jesus is talking about himself. Jesus is the Samaritan. Man is mankind. And the Levite and the priest, right, are the leaders of the day who don't give man what they need, all right? They just stick to their ritual and their law. But Jesus, who's hated by everybody, comes along to sacrifice his time, sacrifice his resources, and care for the broken and bloody.
Man. Mind blown.
Crazy, right?
Listen, it's funny that you say that. I was side story. This is all kind of, I'll give you kind of a scoop of how my preparation for the message is.
Right.
I got my message prepped. The points were still there of what I was sharing. But at the very end, I was going to come across in more of the angle of who are you in the story, right? Because that's what parables really they do. They bring everyday scenarios,
Right.
and they connect with where you are in culture, and they want you to place yourself as a specific character in the story. And depending on what season you're in, you're going to be able to say, "Man, I think I'm acting like that person right now, at least right now in this season." So. One of the things I wanted to conclude in the message was the more that I thought about the parable, I kept asking myself, who am I in the story? Am I the Levite? Am I the priest? Am I the Samaritan? Right? But it was obvious to me that I wasn't I thought I was the Samaritan.
Mm.
For many of us, we look at this story, and if we're doing good deeds, or our life is where God wants it to be, then all right, put yourself in the rightful place of the good Samaritan. But the more I thought about that, the more further from reality I was. Because simple as this, none of us is good.
Right.
So we cannot be the good Samaritan. We're not good. None of us. I mean, the Bible says it. I even had it scriptures here, Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God.
That's right.
Romans 3:10 through 12, Paul says it. None is righteous, not one. No one understands. No one seeks for God. All have turned aside together. They have become worthless. No one does good, not even one.
That's right.
So what does the Samaritan, who then is the Samaritan? And you said it.
Right.
Is Jesus.
It's Jesus, right? Despised by many, right? Especially Jews, right? And again, when we talk about him crafting this parable, right? Which, like me and my oldest, we joke all the time. We were like, man, Jesus got bars, like Jesus just be spitting crazy bars, right? And so you think like he's sitting here, he didn't pre-write this parable, right? Like it was the lawyer came to him and he just like rolled up his sleeves. It was like, I'm knocking you out right now. I'm just gonna freestyle. Somebody give me a beat.
The top of the dome, bro. Quick.
And he crushes him with this story, right?
Wow.
And it's like, but now you say to yourself, okay, so who am I? Right? And I think if we were honest, we fall into all four categories. And some of us are the robbers that aren't even mentioned in this.
It's the truth.
But we find ourselves in every single part of the story.
Yes. And for many people, they are that man.
Yeah.
We all were that man.
We all are that man.
Yeah. We were
on any given day.
We're lost. We're abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
PJ, all right, man. I'm about to blow your mind a little bit here. All right. You blew mine, I'm going to blow yours.
Go for it. Let's
Russian
go.
roulette here. So, Jesus, right, being the Good Samaritan, he saw us. He picked us up. He took our weight upon himself. He paid the price. And I kept thinking about this story more and more. And there's a character in this story that we do not talk about at all. It's the innkeeper.
The innkeeper.
We could be the innkeeper. I think we're called to be the innkeeper. The Good Samaritan brings souls to us. And what do we tell the innkeeper? I'm going to pay you this money.
Right.
When I come back, do with it what you need. If there's more, I will repay you.
Yeah.
I will give it to you. What does God do for us? He's asking us to, as he's bringing lives to us, he does the transforming. He does the picking up. He pays the price. We just are in charge of taking care of those souls and making sure that they're good so that when he comes back, how do you not see Jesus through that?
It's crazy.
He will repay us.
That's right.
Oh,
right?
Man.
Yeah. He gives
you. I'm so glad you brought that angle because that's exactly where I wanted to go on Sunday.
Yeah.
But Pastor, you don't
have enough time, bro.
I know. Time.
Johnny, you. Okay. I want to put you on blast in the pod right now.
Please, man. Go.
Johnny overdoes it all the time. Johnny fills his head up so much that it leaks out of his ears. Right? But Johnny, you don't have 2 hours to preach. We got... Man, we got 3 services, bro. You gotta lock in. You gotta lock in. And I get how hard, but that's what the pod is for, right?
I totally agree with that.
The pod allows us to come in and just kind of dissect what we're doing and where we're thinking, and it's almost like VH1 behind the music, right? That's what the pod is for, right? It's
for the one where you would go to the celebrity's home,
MTV Cribs.
Come to our crib. Yeah,
let me show you what it's like when I'm not on stage. If we went to Johnny's crib before he had to preach, there'd be like 30 books, concordances, sticky notes on his children.
Bro. You guys give me anxiety with like
you give yourself
the type
anxiety.
Of prep you guys put together, which is still good. But listen, man,
You're thorough.
I'm a rookie in this still.
You're thorough.
I'm still a rookie. Like, considering all of it, I don't think I've preached more than 10 times.
Okay, fair.
Give me some,
Fair.
I'm still finding my voice. I'm still finding, they say, I mean, what was the number where you almost start to become an expert at something?
There's a number?
They did, man. They I'll find it scientifically. They kind of came up with a little bit of a number.
I don't think I'm close.
That would, give you some type of framework of like that. You just start to get dialed in whatever craft you're doing. But
it's hard to do research in something that you thought you knew. Right? Because, and this is what I tell you all the time. A lot of times when we're crafting a message, we have to separate what's for us versus what's for them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like what did God reveal to me for me? And then what did God reveal to me for the message? And that's the part that's the hardest, because well, if it's for me, it must be for them too, right? If it's good enough for me, isn't it good enough for them?
They'll go over their heads.
Right. But then you don't have the time to elaborate. Like, one of the things that when I was listening to you on Sunday was like, you mentioned the Samaritan, but almost like we've been talking about, you didn't mention why him being a Samaritan was so important to the story. So what we've alluded to, but the actual fact is, Jews despised Samaritans because Samaritans were a mix of Jew and Gentile. That's pretty much what, as a culture, as a race, if you want to say it like that, that's what they were. They were literally the bastard stepchildren, right? True. And so Jews didn't like that they had one foot in faith and one foot in folly, right? And so they didn't belong. Right. And it's like my middle son was asking me about the passage with the oh no, it wasn't my son, it was someone else. Texted me about the dogs, the woman that says the dogs need to get crumbs off the table as well, when Jesus challenged her and was like, why do we feed the dogs? Because but the dogs get crumbs off the children's plates, right? And so it's like the word is for everybody, but the Samaritans weren't treated like they deserved access to God, right? As a matter of fact, it was the exact opposite. Yeah. It was like, we want nothing to do with you. You don't belong in our temples. You don't belong in our laws. Sure. We're not going to teach you everything. We want you to stay ignorant, right? And that's what makes Jesus' story so problematic for the listener, was because Jesus is saying, your leaders won't do this, yet the people you despise would be willing to stop and give their own money, right? Like, there's a lot of parts to it, right?
Yes.
Took his time, got blood on him, picked this naked man up, gave him his own money, offered to give more, promised to return.
Wow.
What?
Wow.
He's going to come back and finish? Like, not just a one-time thing. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So it's, again, Jesus is going, go the extra mile, because of it's your heart, not your head. Right?
That is truth, bro.
Like, take everything that God has given you and God has shown you, and understand that he's calling you to help your brothers and sisters.
Yeah. No, it's so true. It's so true, bro. Yeah, there was over 700 years of just animosity. Right. So I talked, just to give some framework, I mentioned just how racism here in this country is 400 years. And so it was deeply rooted, ingrained in the culture. And even prior to this text, the disciples wanted Jesus to rain down fire into some villages.
Right. We don't like them, Jesus. Can you just wipe them off?
Yeah, did not even welcome them in. And so here he is, like making this unlikely person the hero of this story. And you can imagine the shock of those listening to this story.
Well, look at the degrees of I don't want to say so much racism, but prejudice, right? Romans against Jews, Jews against Jews, Jews against Gentiles, Jews against Samaritans. Like there were so many degrees. We think we have it bad right now, right?
Yeah.
But there were so many layers of just prejudice, socioeconomic prejudice. Like there were so many degrees of it. Political prejudice, religious prejudice. There was just so much going on at that time. And Jesus is just saying, listen, I'm a God of love, man. Like we are supposed to all come together and head in the direction towards, towards God.
Yeah.
All of us, And so even when he's telling these stories, very, very aware of what the hindrances to faith were, what the hindrances to the care and the love were, he addressed those as well. So this isn't just a story about being ignorant and not caring for people. It's saying none of these social paradigms matter at the end of the day.
Wow.
Right? In spite of this, you are called to act.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's what's so important, is because, again, the validity of the excuses, okay, yeah, we can say yes. However, right, as far back as Exodus, right, God said, help the widow and the poor. You go into Deuteronomy, one of my favorite verses. There will always be poor in the land, spiritually, financially, relationally. So open your hand, but in order to open your hand, you have to open your heart first.
Wow.
And so in spite of all of that, God was constantly calling his people to open their hearts. And it just couldn't happen.
Yeah.
Right. So Jesus had to come shake them up.
Shake them up.
Right?
Shake them up, man. So good. So good. And so, I really hope, is there any other insights that maybe caught your attention a little bit? We talked, I'll give you just the quick 3 points that we shared on Sunday for those that are listening. But, really to be a neighbor requires us to overcome our blindness. Seeing was the common denominator here between the priest, the Levite, and the Samaritan. So it really makes it important for us to really hone in on seeing people. And that's where we got the eyes of our heart and the eyes of our head compares. Example there. But, let's be honest, man, like seeing others is really, I said it on Sunday, but a marker of the kingdom of God, and really a call for all of us as disciples of Jesus to really see the circumstances, because that's our testimony.
Right.
I once was blind, but now I see. Right. And so it's just passing that. And who can I open my eyes to? What circumstances can I open my eyes to? But the reality is, like, seeing others is that first step, but is what we do with sight that ultimately brings about the entirety of that blessing, of that impact. And my second point is where a lot of us, to be a neighbor requires overcoming inconveniences.
Right.
And then this was a tough one for me. No one wants to be inconvenienced.
Right.
No one wants to reschedule their plans or deviate from them at all. The priest, the Levite, and Samaritan all had a destination to go to. But one chose to see a need over their schedule.
And then let's talk about actual literal neighbors, right? How many of us are long day at work, you drive home.
Yeah.
You go right into your garage. You don't even step foot on your sidewalk or your driveway. The door closes down and you're back in your domicile, right? There's no interaction with your neighbors, like actual neighbors, right?
It's true.
Kids don't play together on the street anymore. There's no...
COVID highlighted that a lot.
Right. There's no welcome neighbor, new people in the neighborhood. You don't know. People come and go. You don't know. You know, it's so crazy. I literally had a neighbor ask me about my truck, and then 4 days later, he was gone. Like they moved. It wasn't even like, hey, oh, by the way, you know, it's been nice being your neighbor, even though we didn't know. I mean, we would wave, walking the dogs and stuff like that. But he literally, like, huge life change. Moved out of the neighborhood. Don't know where he is. Didn't see a sign on the house. Never saw a U-Haul. Like, dude, like, snuck away in the middle of the night. And it was just like, we're 4 houses down.
That's crazy.
Like, had a 20-minute conversation about my new vehicle in my driveway. And then 4 days later, he was gone. And not even like, well, it was nice chatting with you. You know, wish you all the best. I'm going to be moving for whatever. Like, even that was an inconvenience. Like, he asked everything he needed about the truck, and then that was it. Nothing about you, you know. And you know me, I'm sitting there, I'm talking, I'm like, da 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 da, laughing, petting the dog, hanging out, and then gone.
That's crazy.
You know, and it's like so many times, again, even the inconvenience of just spending a couple minutes with your actual neighbor.
So true, bro.
Is difficult. You know?
Yeah, and one of the things that hit me a lot was the great illusion of sacrifice. What would be a sacrifice in this sense of taking action,
right,
towards someone, towards a need, is that we're not going to get anything in return.
But is it a sacrifice? See, we gotta be careful when we use this word sacrifice. Like, is it a sacrifice? Like, what is, like, if we were to look up the definition of sacrifice right now, it's not going to be what we think it is. I'm going to look it up. But it's
much more deeper, right?
It won't be what we think it is.
Yeah.
And so what we view as sacrifice is really just minor inconvenience.
It is.
But that's minor.
Isn't that sad?
Minor inconvenience.
It's sad.
Okay.
That's the state of our society now.
So
that it's considered a sacrifice for you to say hi to someone.
Right. So number one is the offering of an animal, plant, or human life, right? Which we understand when we know the sacrificial system, you know, the laws, right? The surrender or destruction of something prized or desirable for the sake of something considered as having a higher or more pressing claim. All right?
Sounds a lot
surrender or destruction. Right? That's a whole lot more than I'm going to be 10 minutes late for dinner. Or, you know, my show starts at 8 o'clock. Yeah. I can't be outside talking to my neighbor when, you know, Survivor season 37, you know, a loss incurred in selling something below its value. Wow. Now that one's deep, because do we view our time or our agenda as more value?
What is our highest value in life?
Time and money, right?
Time and money.
For all of us who have both.
Yeah. Totally.
Right? Because for those who don't have money, i.e., go to Brazil. Spend some time on one of our mission trips in Brazil
and look what it is to not have money.
Find out what it is to not have money, but also to not be pressed for time. I remember the first time I went to Brazil, and we're building houses, and we would start 7 o'clock in the morning. We'd be out there, and we would be hitting it. But now 11:30 comes, and it's time for lunch, right? And I'm like, okay, plow through my plate of food. We got to go back to work. American mindset, right? Half hour passes. Hour passes. The guys that are in charge are laid out on the floor, you know, talking, drinking coffee. And I'm like, are we going back to work? Hour and a half passes. I'm like, okay, now I'm getting tired.
Yeah.
Right? Now it's 2 o'clock. And I'm like, okay, they get up slow. Now let's go back to work. I'm like, I thought we were done for the day. But they're just, and that's all of Brazil life, right? Yeah, it's just, we're laid back. It's cool. It's okay. You know, people have no money.
Yeah. It will get done when it get done.
But it's going to get done. Yeah. And mind you, once we started at 2, we worked till 8.
Yeah.
Right? But even that vibe and that mentality is different. Like, we're working, but we're engaging.
Yeah.
And there's conversations happening. It's not that head
yeah.
down,
yeah.
grinding, it's joyful labor.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. But we take time and money to here in this country to a place where you often have to consider, are we productive or are we just busy?
Mm.
And are we busy or are we just distracting ourselves? Right?
Wow.
And then with the money, are we appropriating our funds properly, or is money our master because we spend it so callously and right? And so we're constantly chasing debt, and we're chasing, and then so many people say, well, when I get to a certain place,
just become a slave,
then I will do
bracket.
this. And you just slave to the next tax bracket, right?
Bro, yeah.
When I get here, then I will do this. But then when you get there, you want more, you see more, you feel like you deserve more because you've put so much time into, right? And so it's just this circle.
Yeah.
And it really takes stepping outside of this country to really have your eyes opened to how much we are a slave to our time. Wow. And a slave to our money.
Wow. Without even knowing.
Which doesn't allow us to. But that's why I think especially our church, and I'm not throwing shade against anyone about this, but that's what makes us such a mission-centered church, is because we want people to have those experiences. And I will tell you that families and individuals come back from those trips, and they don't come back home and give everything away and move into a tiny home and do things like that, but they really start to consider their lifestyles and their habits and the things that were important to them. And wow. And you start to see people modifying their lives in that sense, which is important, because we can't take the time and the money with us. We can't. And at the end of the day, God's not going to want to know how much we gave, we tithed in the church. Yes, it's important, but what he's going to want to know is how you served, how you loved, and it's so important, and we do miss it.
Man,
we do miss it so many times. So this whole thing is just really that kind of a wake-up call to just kind of say, listen, we daily, which is difficult, but we often really need some self-examination. And a parable like this forces you to do just that. So do like you said, put yourself in each place. And how can you find commonality with each of the characters? Because there is. We'd be lying to ourselves if we didn't see ourselves as each of the people in this story.
That's facts.
Right?
That's facts.
And again, it's not about where you're failing. It's about where you could be better.
Yes.
Right? So it's not about failure.
Not at all.
Right? It's about being better.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, definitely, man. And then the last point was just to be a neighbor requires overcoming differences. And this one was a tough one.
That's a tough one.
This one was a tough one for me. Obviously you think differences, and we just came.
Is it because I'm a Vikings fan? You could just be honest with me.
Listen, I got out.
You said it earlier.
Out the stage on Sunday and immediately went to a Detroit Lions fan. I said, "You're my neighbor, despite being a Lions fan."
I love you.
And so I tell you here, in public, amongst all of our listeners, thousands and millions of them, you're still my neighbor, brother, even if you're a Vikings fan. So.
I'm not there yet, Johnny.
Pray for Pastor PJ.
I'm still a
guys.
priest.
Pray for Pastor PJ. I'll always.
I would help you,
Levi.
but if you're wearing a Packers shirt, I might walk by. I might cross the street.
Whatever, man. Whatever. Oh man.
Hey, I live with a Lions fan, bro.
So
I live with a Lions fan.
You're conflicted.
I'm conflicted. We're a house divided.
Divided. Man, this has been fun.
Yeah.
This has been so much fun.
So let's see, takeaways, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Takeaways. I think this is an encouraging passage. At the end of the day, I think when we look at it, let's start, is a point I wanted to bring up, is that the lawyer asks, who is my neighbor? right? That's how the whole thing starts, right? And Jesus turns around and he goes, verse 36, which of these three do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man, right? So he's asking, who do I serve, right? Who are the people in my area that I should serve, right? And Jesus is saying, no. That's not the question.
Yeah.
Right? Or the answer to your question is not the question you asked, but I'm telling you, you be a neighbor, right? Not who's my neighbor. No. Everyone you're around is your neighbor. So you need to change the perspective. And he says, who's the neighbor? Who do you be a neighbor to? The one who showed him the mercy. He's the neighbor. All right. So he's kind of saying, look at yourself. All right. And so it's such a weird, just challenge, right? Which Jesus constantly does is he challenges these guys, and he does it with so much love.
Yeah.
And he doesn't attack them. He just says, and then at the end he says, you go and do likewise, right? Don't ask who your neighbor is. You be a neighbor.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
And that's again, it's contradictory to the question. It's contradictory to the law. It's contradictory to the lifestyle. But God has always called us to be countercultural.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's what makes him the Samaritan.
Yeah.
Right?
It's funny to me that he didn't even, like, he could have said the Samaritan was the one that showed mercy, and technically he would have been correct.
Right.
It shows kind of two things. Like, I'm not willing to say those people are good.
Right. Right.
But in a even deeper way, it's like you kept it broad, the story or the answer, which is actually good, because it is we and anyone we encounter is a neighbor.
Right.
So Jesus let him have the narrow thinking of who is my neighbor, but he brought him this story, and then he's essentially saying, okay, if you want to keep your narrow thinking of neighbor, and if you want to make neighbor somebody that's just someone in your proximity or your association, I want you to take neighbor with you wherever you go.
Right. And the lawyer is the one, the disposition changes from the beginning to the end, right?
Yeah.
Because the lawyer didn't say the Samaritan. Remember, now he's the one that answered the question.
Yeah.
He says the one who showed him mercy.
Yeah, exactly.
Now that's so intense, because by the end of the story, and I could just imagine watching the lawyer sitting there listening to Jesus and watching, you had said it, right? His chest was puffed out, right? He came at Jesus in this way, like, I kind of got you with this one. So now you tell me what I'm supposed to do. And I could just see him. I could see his posture changing. I could see his face softening, all right? And because you know why? Because Jesus didn't attack his head. He attacked his heart. Right? And so
true.
He, at the end of the story, his lesson was learned. And man, I could just imagine how his life changed after hearing that one story. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I so many times, and here's the thing, we have this story, and it's about saving an individual person.
Wow.
Right? Now, Jesus is in a crowd, and he's surrounded. He always was. And he tells this parable, and it was for him. And I could just imagine this crowd around, and Jesus just standing face to face, maybe just standing across from this guy, and just going, all these people, all this noise, all of this stuff around. And Jesus is like, hey, let me tell you a story. And just that, again, personal, one-on-one interaction. And it's the parable is in the story, and it's in real life. Jesus took his time, right? He had an agenda. He had everything going on, and he took his time to do what? Save this lawyer's life.
Yeah.
Pick him up, clean him up, make sure he was cared and loved for.
Yeah.
And that man walked away healed.
Yeah.
And transformed.
Yeah. So true. So true. Wow. Wow. Thank you, brother.
Hey.
Today has been
happy to be
here. Great. Really excited. Thank you for joining me, man. And we might get you on a few more times, bro.
Listen, I'm here.
With Tim on sabbatical, I'm just saying.
Yeah, right.
Keep that seat warm, bro.
We may not want him back. We might have to change the graphic. I'm just saying. I don't have enough Nikes to do this podcast every week.
Rocky Balboa t-shirts.
I'm not equipped. I don't have enough hair. I don't have enough Nikes. I can't.
This has been so much fun, man. We're so thankful for all of you for tuning in and being with us here today.
We really hope this blessed you the way it blessed us.
Yeah, so much. I will always say, man, that like there's no better person that takes in the most than the person preparing the word.
That's right.
And so I told my wife this morning, because we'll get ready, Chad and I, to speak this Sunday. And I'm laughing through some content, just enjoying it and savoring it.
Right.
And it's just like, I was just telling her, like, man, there's no time like absorbing scripture when you are getting ready to deliver it, because it highlights your own life.
So receptive, right? And guilty enough. I wish I read the Bible every day like I was preparing a message. I really do, because
facts, bro.
One, I don't. Facts. And then secondly, like, yeah, you just it actually rings you out. Like, I don't know about you, but when I'm writing in that extent, I am consumed.
So true.
You know?
All in.
And it is a blessing.
Yeah.
It really it's a burden, but it's a blessing, because we do, that consumption is really about, again, just how much we love our people.
Yeah, bro.
And how we want to, at the end of the day, we want to bless them. We want everybody walking out differently than the way they walked in.
Right.
So
we love y'all. We love all of our listeners. Listen, a couple things just to help us out. If you are listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify, hit the star, the rating. Give us a 5-star rating. We would love that. Just help expose the podcast a little bit more and get in front of some new faces. Same thing for YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification tab as well, the little bell, and that will notify you every time we have something new for you guys. So just keep those things in mind. And then we're on social media: TikTok, Instagram, X. Follow us there. Keep in touch with us there. And so we're thankful. We're thankful for the opportunity to be with you guys today, and we hope that you were blessed on episode 46. As until next week, we can't wait to be with you guys, episode 47. But until then, grace and peace.